Thursday. Welcome to another episode of Crypto with English. So, I'd like to warmly welcome a special guest today. So, he is a blockchain podcaster, author, content creator, and business builder. He's also somebody I've done a virtual conference and summit with as well. Someone who I would consider a genuine subject matter expert on many facets of blockchain itself, Jamil Hasan. Thank you for coming on to the show and great seeing you again.
Oh, it's great seeing you. Yeah, we had a great conference in Dubai online, and
Yeah,
thank you for inviting me today to be on the show.
yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to showcase today is your newest project. So the crypto hipster publications and the podcast itself. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure, but before we do, I want to touch on one thing, and I
Sure.
want to talk about the elephant in the room. And I'm not your typical guest. Your typical guest is I see you on here with talking to attractive young women all the time, and I'm a 51-year-old crusty wrinkled man, and I'm like, okay, I'm not your typical if you and I were in a club together, I'd be your wingman 20 years ago. But but it's good to be here. So yeah, I'm working on the Chronicles
Yeah, talk
now, and
about that.
what that is I did 182 podcasts over the past year and a half, and I'm building up my own station, my own brand. And when a lot of the podcasts I've done, a lot of the content, because I don't ask like what's your price of your token, or what's the market doing today. I
Yeah,
ask like challenging thought leadership questions, and they end up I end up having universal answers that I could play 10 years from now and have it be like still meaningful. So I
yeah,
said, okay, I have all that content. So let me put it together and take one question from each of these podcasts for three or four people, and create a topic and create a chronicles. And so far, it's gone really well. And I wanted to see if I could, if it made sense and the subject matter was relevant, and it is. So I'm going to roll with it.
yeah. Absolutely. And this year it's clearly been very volatile and tumultuous. As far as, you know, world events in the web3 blockchain space, what do you think are some of the biggest pain points, on the road ahead?
Well, I'm working on my next book now, and it is
Talk about it.
I don't have the title yet defined totally, but I interviewed from the period of the end last week in February to the first week in May. I interviewed 13 people from the Ukraine. Some were, people who were under the rubble at the time. Another was a man who built shelters on the front lines, and I also interviewed the deputy minister of financial transformation. And what I learned, and talk about pain points, war is a pain point. What I learned was, Ukraine is probably one of the most advanced nations in the world as far as the use of crypto, NFTs, and digital transformation, and how they were doing it, and how that applies and could be used by the rest of the world. So there are lessons there. So that's the pain point. First pain point is war. So I'm working on that now, and the AI algorithms translating English from you and I are pretty good, but when you have heavy accents, it's a lot of work to go through all the words. So that's what's making me a little bit take longer than expected, but I'm gonna get there. And then all the stuff that's happened since June. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in crypto since June and Web3. You had bankruptcies, you had contagion, how to
Yeah.
navigate through that. You know, it's not just technology you got to navigate; it's the personal and interpersonal skills like resilience and trusting yourself and all that stuff. And mental health. That's all come into play now.
Right. And what about Bitcoin itself? So, obviously that's taken a few, a few blows to the face, if we're to use boxing terminology. Maybe ate a few haymakers this year, so to say. So, what are your feelings on, the road ahead for, Bitcoin itself, and perhaps even potential successors in the near future. I think we can all agree that Bitcoin is probably among the best of, you could say, DeFi and tokens, but even that has its huge, I guess you could say, huge frequencies of volatility on any
Mhm.
given day.
Well, I wasn't around in 2013 for the crypto industry, but I was in 2017. And I was an advisor in the ICO space, one of the few US
Yeah.
people who were.
Wow.
And in 2018, when crypto winter hit, I finished the year with 2 heart attacks, but along the way,
Oh wow.
yeah, that's okay. I'm better. Along the way, I lost like everything. I lost my mountain bike I had for 25 years. I lost my jet season tickets. I lost my business. And that was winter. And what people don't really know is the crypto winters, the crypto bear markets can be especially brutal, you know?
Right.
And that's what you're seeing now, but you're seeing it more widespread because more people are in it. If you draw the comparisons, it's really the same. It's a bear market, it's a winter, and you're going to have loss. So by the end of 2018, Bitcoin was $3,000, and I was focused on recovering from my heart attack, so I wasn't working. I wanted to buy then, I couldn't, but I said it'll rebound, and it did. It came back to 60. It came up to 60.
Yeah.
Um, the blockchain ain't going nowhere. It's not going
Right.
anywhere. The people who are Bitcoiners will capitulate, but the Bitcoin blockchain, unbreakable, unhackable. You can hack exchanges, you can hack wallets, but you can't really. It's kind of like Easter Island. Those standards are going to be there. Bitcoin is going to be there. It ain't going nowhere. People say, people claim it's death. In my last book, Blockchain Ethics, Fighting Honorable Battles, I talk about the 450 times it's been pronounced dead in the media. It's
Right.
not dead. It's not dead.
Right.
So it's going to last. It's going to be there. And when we start looking at it in terms of how do we use it to solve, environmental problems, how do we use it to make breakthroughs in math? When we start looking at it that way, kind of like people started looking at in Italy, started looking at Jesus in 1100, AD instead of 0 AD. You're going to look back later on. We might not be here, but our future generations are going to look back and say, okay, this is what's possible. This is what they didn't learn. This is what we are learning. It's here to stay.
Right. So I guess using the context of biblical history and, let's say, the New Testament, would this be a biblical moment for technology, generally speaking?
When they were building the printing press, they didn't realize it was a moment. When they were in Kitty Hawk, they didn't realize it was a moment.
Right.
You look back 100 years, like, oh, that was the moment. Very very few inventions come along that are universal. And
Right.
that last. So I think we're early in the stage of that technology being able to last, and in order to really defeat it, you're going to need breakthroughs in quantum, and we're not there
Right.
yet.
Right.
So
And just to expand on that, you mean quantum computing, and
yeah.
kind of think right now we're really in the very early stages, more or less, on that front before
Mhm.
I guess any type of tangible use on either my end or most people's end would be.
That's right. That's right.
I was on Amazon and I was checking out your books earlier, and you had this one publication out that I thought was very interesting. So, blockchain ethics: a bridge to abundance. Can you explain what ethics are in this space? Because I think a lot of the focus tends to be on a lot of the great potential, and rightfully so, of this overall umbrella of technology, but seldom you hear the conversation about ethics itself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I was the first ethics writer in this space, and for that, I was called a scammer. And the people who are the scammers were called ethical. So it's backwards. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, absolutely.
um, I wrote that book. I published it in March 2018. It was my first book. I wrote it with a friend of mine from college who helped me out. And what happened was I had a publisher, and her husband was the ICO advisor. And I gave her money to help market the book, and she wasn't doing it. And she
Oh,
called me a month later, and she was like, I ended up self-publishing because she was like, "Yeah, we're not gonna market you. You're gonna come up the hard way." And I'm like, What's the hard way? Well, I've learned what the hard way is. And I decided
Yeah.
this past year to write 2 more ethics books. What's ethics? I can tell you the ethics is not the actions of the SEC right now. And I'm not going to name names, but I'm like, you know what? When you don't do a certain job that you're required to do, and then you try to hurt the crypto industry, that's not ethical. But a year and a half after I wrote that book, MIT, said for the first time ever, we're having a conference. We're combining 2 words. It's called blockchain and ethics. No acknowledgement of my work, and I'm like,
Right.
that's not ethical. Ethical is acknowledging people who are here
Right.
saying this is what they did or what they're doing, and then okay, can we talk to that?
Right.
Um, I'm going to keep on interviewing people for my podcasts and books and all that stuff because I think it's the right thing to do. And if people, don't want to read or don't want to listen, they don't have to. But
Right.
I'm going to keep uncovering the truth, and uncovering the truth, that's ethical.
Right. And I'm curious too. For I guess you could say detractors that accuse what you were doing as being a scam, what would they actually say? Because I'm thinking to myself, if somebody is putting out a publication on ethics, that is probably among the least scam-like subject matters you can kind of put forward as far as a product or a service out, because I would think if somebody's putting forward something that is akin to a scam, it's like buy this service in blockchain, buy this token in blockchain, buy these services on this platform in blockchain, because it seems like scams more or less kind of come from almost the same 2 or 3 places a lot of times, at least as far as the bad examples we've seen in this space. So somebody putting out a book on ethics, that is probably among the more academic pursuits one can do in this space.
You got to discredit the ethics guy.
Yeah,
You
like
have
I said,
to.
I am just curious how like the argument was from the other person's end, like, oh, Jamil, this is kind of scammy. Like, what are you trying to sell people here? Like,
Yeah.
like
Well, I'm horrible in sales. If I were great in sales, I'd have a whole bunch of money right now. But once it'd be sitting from my house, I have an office. Yeah, I got to learn how to do sales. But you know, my pursuit is basically, have as many people who don't understand crypto get to understand it. You
right,
know, and the other day, I was doing these Facebook precision marketing, and they halted me. They stopped me on that. So I tried to get it out there because they had me like I asked for an audience in the UK, and
yeah,
they sent me to Middle America. And the UK is responsive and receptive to crypto, and a lot of people in Middle America are not yet. So you should have seen the responses I got back. I won't talk to you about them on the air, but
right,
they're not friendly.
right.
So you know,
That's and that's interesting. And of course, you don't have to recite the specifics of those, but you found that, let's say, audiences in the UK are quite open to the conversation, and I guess you could say the self-learning journey of blockchain. And I guess pitching that same type of idea and subject matter to, let's say, a different audience, and let's say if it's Indiana, for instance, far less receptive. Um,
far less, far less. And
Interesting.
I'm not too far from you. I'm in Connecticut, right?
Right, you're in Connecticut, so I mean, you're probably an hour, not even drive from me.
Right. But
Yeah,
I'm in the middle of all the bankers and
right.
all the
That's
hedge
right.
funds. They don't want me to be successful. I understand,
Right.
but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because, in your yard,
Yeah.
and if I'm the little termite in your yard, I'm still going to be the termite in your yard.
And speaking of which,
So,
since yeah, that's right. Yeah, and don't underestimate even the the potential of just one termite for especially the summer.
that's right.
So, since you are in, Connecticut, and and I think for people up here in the Northeast, there is a tremendous amount of wealth, influence, and many of institutional bankers, and you could say a lot of the faces of those institutions live in various, actually probably a handful of areas in Connecticut that are quite well known, up here as well. Is Connecticut, is there like a blockchain culture there, so to say? Because when I think of Connecticut, being a guy from New Jersey, just right outside New York City, my My business is in New York State. But when I think of Connecticut, I think of old money. A lot of people tend to. When it comes to the Northeast, especially, you think of old money. And I think a lot of times when you think of maybe new money, it's like hit or miss. I think when it comes to New York, if somebody has a great business and it does well, great. But you also have the Morgan Stanleys and the Goldman Sachs of the world too. But I think Connecticut almost gets this kind of universal old money association with it. Not to say that it's entirely true, but that is kind of like a prevailing perception. So I'm kind of wondering, as a blockchain guy, as a blockchain thought leader in this space, would I imagine that there's a fair amount of pushback in some of those circles? Let's say if you're going into some old money town in Connecticut, you start talking about blockchain and some of the potential and even some of the successes with crypto tokens. Are people, or maybe some of those crowds, are they kind of clutching their pearls and they're thinking, okay, I don't want this to erode my bottom line and the portfolio I have elsewhere?
Oh yeah. You have Jamie Dimon here, you have Ray Dalio here, you have
Right,
all the old money here, you have,
right,
people who want to win, but they want to win on their terms. And a lot of
of
times
course,
my terms are very different than what their terms are.
right.
I recently passed an exam to be a certified digital asset advisor.
And again,
I feel
congratulations on that.
Thank you. I feel I'm qualified to help people understand the space. And then, there are a lot of soft skills as well. You got to understand. And one of them is resilience. One of them is patience. One of
Right,
them, tolerance, all kinds of different things to learn. And it seems like everywhere and every day you turn, there's, fear, uncertainty, doubt placed in the media by the traditional players,
right,
and how do you navigate that? And I've been navigating it for 3 years, and sometimes I still get it wrong. How do you know when, what's going to make an impact? Like there are certain influencers within crypto who, made an impact against certain exchanges in crypto,
right,
and I made a mistake. I didn't think they had any credibility, and I was wrong. They had a lot of credibility with their audiences, and there was an impact.
right,
So how do you steer and navigate all that, and also understand, like what you said earlier, DeFi. Because DeFi is very different than me going down to a bank or a hedge fund and putting my money with them. It's self custody. It's self. And a lot of people are still financially illiterate, unfortunately.
right.
How do you train that? So
Yeah, and and kind of going to some of the things you touched on earlier, Ukraine, for instance. And I think Ukraine is not unique when it comes to this one aspect, but a lot of times when there is some sort of national crisis or catastrophe, banks are among the first things to shut down. And I think we can look at the course of modern history and even pull out even more examples from that. But one of the successes was because of these various blockchain and crypto projects that emerged, since February of this year with the invasion of Ukraine. People were able to send money to Ukrainians in the middle of that crisis, where if they're not able to withdraw their money from the banks, there were all of these tech projects where people can get money over. I found it very, very promising and very,
mhm,
very uplifting. In fact, that these are kind of the readily available solutions that we have, and these are coming from startups. These are coming from entrepreneurs. These are coming from very, very ambitious, passionate teams who've effectively put together things in a relatively short amount of time and
mhm.
provided a real tangible solution, so to say. Let's say if you're to wait for, and I'm not going to point out any names here, but if you're to wait for a larger institution per se to do the same thing, I mean, listen, those moments, those days, I mean, those are easily, that's easily the line between life and death, especially, in a wartime situation.
Well, yeah. They did two main things. Well, three, but two main things. One is they worked with PayPal to, the government did
Yeah,
to enable, financial transactions for the people who were leaving, going to Poland or Ireland or the UK. They had access to the financial infrastructure. That was huge from the government perspective. From an artist perspective, all these NFT projects, were created and people were able to purchase NFTs.
Right.
Art for Ukraine, White Rabbit did something, a bunch, and really empowered the artists to help fund the military. And then three, exchanges like FTX, like other exchanges,
Right.
Binance, made donations, and you were able to track and see where the donations went. Where in the past, you might have donated to an organization and not known where the money went. Now you can,
Point.
with blockchain, you can see exactly where it goes, and a lot of it went to the funding the government and the military. So they opened up a really transparent way of showing where the money in a nation went, and it really created an economy and a smartphone.
Yeah. I have a question. I've heard this comment about blockchain made either by, I guess, a different speaker. This person was either a comedian, but also a subject matter expert in the space. But blockchain and cryptocurrency is where altruism and personal interest meet. So it's very easy for many people once they know about it to really get into it and really participate and really become parts of the ecosystem. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the chronicles I put out today was on altruism. It was part of the conversations with Franz Strajnar, who founder of Tekami in New Zealand. But I've had other conversations like with David Schwartz, who's the founder, director of Litecoin Foundation. That when Charlie Lee founded the Litecoin, he did it altruistically. A friend of mine, Chrissy Smith, in the space, she bought a lot of ENS domains and is setting up a shop for donations altruistically. A lot of people think crypto is just about money, and it's not. There's really three elements. One is long term try to investment. One is short term or whatever retirement, and the other one is the revolution. The revolution is all about altruism. It's about doing the right thing, trying to carry the message, being part of the economy. Because my other book, my major book that I wrote a couple years ago was Regeneration X, and it showed how the current leadership generation that's in charge or government and corporate,
Right.
when they took over, a lot of people were thrown onto the sidelines. And it wasn't about altruism. It was about control and taking over for themselves. And a lot of people were out of work, millions. And
Right.
I was one of them, still unable to get back to a job. I will someday, you know. But you know, why am I in crypto? It's not just to make money. It's because I feel I have an opportunity, and now especially with DAOs and other ways to do it, is to have an opportunity to build a career, build a life, build a legacy, and not be beholden to the way things were by an old structure that's antiquated.
Right. Absolutely. And speaking of structures, um, you touched on regulation, earlier today, and you also spoke the fact that really a lot of the bad stuff won't be coming from the regulators, and I think that's a good clarification to make. I do feel at some point there is going to be a regulatory structure that I think we're all going to have to interact with in the future. So say, and I think that structure is still being defined at the moment. I guess depending on which country, but for the most part, it is still being defined. What are your thoughts as far as how regulation is going to look for, let's say, me, you, and even kind of the rest of us in the years to come?
We have a lot of lawyers in the U.S., so probably the
Yeah,
U.S.
right.
Isn't the best thing to look at when you're talking about regulation. I've had regulation conversations with people from 35 different countries.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is Switzerland is doing a really great job, as far as setting the bar.
Can you talk about that? The Swiss model of doing things here.
I don't know the specifics in general, but I'm telling you that they have the backing of the entities and the people, and
Okay.
they're looking to build something that works for everybody, not just something that works for the banks.
Right.
They're looking to work with people and not just comply with like the European rules, but like what's forward thinking as far as what's going to build companies, what's going to help entrepreneurs, what's going to help VCs, what's going to help everybody, win, and what's going to make Switzerland the leader in the world. And I know they're looking at regulation in Dubai to do the same kind of thing,
Right.
in Hong Kong. And they're looking forward and saying, okay, how does everybody win? And in order to have a that conversation, the lawyers all have to get on the same page, because if they look at it that way, then they're going to lose revenue. So you
Right.
have to get by that that pushback. But once
Yeah.
you get past the pushback, then there are a lot of things that need to be looked at, because there was a and I put this in my Regeneration X book. There was a guy who wrote, and his name is escaping me, in 1906, the law of automobiles. And he looked at every single way and every single path that people drive, and what everything is, and why you drive, and what are the rules and standards around it.
Right.
Um, I think we need to do the same thing. Um, but I haven't seen like different areas get together and say, hey, this is how we collaborate. I
Right.
think that needs to happen.
Very well said. And I was checking out one of your other books earlier today, too. Blockchain ethics. Arise. From the ashes. Talk about that one. A little bit as well, because like I said, I think the potential of blockchain technology is immense, and I think we're already seeing it. But one thing we can't lose sight of would be ethics and how one can be ethical in this space. Because I think if there's no clear roadmap to that, the industry is going to shoot itself in the foot. So yeah, if you can, expand and talk about that publication.
Sure, that was that was like that. I could actually name that Crypto Hipsters Chronicles, because it was an episode,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was an interview. My 4 full interviews I had with JD Salvego, with Michael Dowling, and with Sarah, and with Jillian Godsell, and that was the very beginning of the NFTs, like before the Bored Apes came out.
Right,
We were only really the crypto punks were there, and we were talking about how they came about. And Sarah, he had been a graffiti artist, for not just this year. He's been a graffiti artist for 30 years, and he had a lot of haters, and people who didn't want him to continue to do his art. But he's been
yeah,
the inspiration for art, like in Philadelphia, New York, and all over. And he said, you know what? You just stay in the game. You stay there. You keep doing the art. You keep building. You keep having the conversations. And I think one of the things about ethics is we have to keep having the conversations of what's the right way to do business, and how should companies and how should people incorporate crypto into their lives, and do it in a way that they're not afraid that their money is gone the next day.
right,
And how do you do that the right way? And so right now there's a lot of gray area, but we need to continue to define the gray, because it's never going to be black and white.
right.
But we have to learn how to live in the gray and build together in that gray.
Yeah, yeah. And I think much of the world and much of our, day-to-day experience, operates, in the gray as well. And I think that's a very good point. Like, do you think that as a let's say as a society, or as participants in this Web3 era, so to say, should we like either derive or somehow implement various ideas, let's say democratic ideals, let's say even coming from things like the Constitution and the Magna Carta, like things like that, like things that kind of provide a framework. And I know those both of those examples are a little bit more on the ancient side, so to say. But some of these principles of transparency and fairness, they're absolutely necessary, no matter what era in history you're in, or whatever type of space you're in, as well. Like, I guess, like I said, so do you think something concrete as far as like an ethical code needs to arise from this, so to say, so people can kind of think like, oh, okay, that should kind of be my baseline when I interact with either entities or people in this ecosystem?
I think I think what should arise from the ashes is a better way to deal with each other. You know,
Huh.
it's
Yeah.
not. It shouldn't be left versus right. And if you're not on one side, you're wrong.
Right.
It has to be okay. You and I disagree. And we disagree pretty strongly on what's the middle ground.
Yeah.
How can we create something in the middle that might not be completely acceptable or 100% in favor of you or not even 100% in favor of me, but how do you and I collaborate? I didn't see that collaboration under Trump. He's probably
Right.
one of the most bashed people in the media, second to Bitcoin. I don't see that. I see, okay, you're right or I'm right, you're wrong. Ain't gonna work,
Right.
and I understand why that happens in the media because you got to sell, you got to have viewers, right?
Right.
But having that viewers in the media kind of is very counterproductive to actually having those cooperations and collaborations in real life.
Yeah. Well, I have a question. So, do you think the media, perhaps, should be allocated maybe some of the blame or some of the culpability, in a lot of this? Because I think what I've come across in terms of many people is that Web3 and blockchain is not this binary politicized space. This is, generally speaking, a space of very free thinking, very open minded people. So to say. So you don't essentially run into this kind of dichotomy as maybe you would elsewhere, so to say. I could even say in my own anecdotal experience, I've never really encountered, at least in any meaningful way, people who are of this mind of, you know, of true black and white thinking, of true either, it's either this or that and nothing else. You don't really see so much of that in this space. And I definitely would not say that is the majority of people. Actually, I would say the majority is quite the opposite. The open-minded, real free-thinking group of people. But yeah, but back to the original question. Does the media have culpability in, let's say, maybe contaminating, let's say, other areas, let's say if it's industry or society? And many people say Trump is a creation of the media over the past 10 to 15 years as well. I mean, listen, maybe one could say if these were the Eisenhower and Kennedy years, somebody like Trump wouldn't have a shot. People would not take somebody seriously like that in another time.
I think social media has a huge impact. I also think that Dodd Frank had a huge impact.
Mm,
so, you know,
absolutely.
um, you had people and still haven't dealt with it. The only industry that was not impacted at all by COVID was the appointment of the board of directors in corporate America. That went smoothly without a hitch. And if you
Very
look,
good
which I
points.
did, at the people's backgrounds in the proxy statements versus what their actual background was, I took the time to do that. You'll
Yeah.
see a lot of embellishment. And, so you have people who are at the top who may not necessarily belong at the top telling me and you what and how to think.
Yeah.
Um, that doesn't work for me, and I don't fall for that. And I don't play that way. So, do they? Yeah. Do you have unqualified people at the top because they know somebody? Yeah. Do you have, is there an opportunity someday to change that? I think you change it through the DAO. You change it through blockchain technology, through emerging technologies. Is there something that needs to be done? Yeah. But I would definitely question who it is that's telling you what to think and how to think it, and then say, you know what, that doesn't go with my beliefs and who I am, and so I'm not going to listen to them. That's a job, and a lot of people don't necessarily, want to take the time to do that. But I say you gotta.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And that is a very interesting point you raised, especially during the course of pandemic. I guess you could say the thing that did not slow down was, you could say, the appointment of these various executives onto various boards and whatnot. And I think that is particularly telling of either things now and perhaps things to come. It's a little unfortunately it's a little unfortunate that that's the part that seemed to be running like a well-oiled machine, unlike
Mhm.
other aspects. So And moving forward from that, your book Regeneration X. Could you talk about what was the inspiration in drafting that? How was that process, and what made you? I guess what guided your trajectory in making that publication?
It was probably one of the most painful processes of my life. So, um, in 2017, I was laid off in 2017. I was at AIG for a total of 12 years, and company had to downsize like most other Fortune 1000 companies. And
Right.
what I noticed, and I survived 10 rounds of layoffs, and I didn't survive round 11. But what I noticed then was in 2017, you had a whole bunch of people who had no data experience in their life walk into corporate America and say, "Hey, data's new," and
Yeah.
get C-suite jobs. And I built databases, data warehouses, data departments, all that stuff for 20 years.
Yeah.
I didn't get one interview and 40,000 applications. And I said, okay, you know what? Something's wrong here.
Yeah.
So I said, why not write a book about it? Because I at AIG, I helped build the CCAR platform, which helped the company comply with Dodd-Frank.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like the expert in that. And so I wrote a book on it, and I chose the wrong publisher. I didn't do my due diligence, and I chose a publisher who was a felon. And so $16,000, and I learned don't ever pay a publisher. Self publish if you have to.
Yeah.
But you know, every week for half a year, they came back with major edits. I thought I was done. I kept thinking I was done, and
Yeah.
they kept pushing it back to make sure I never got done. But I got done
Oh,
right.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I got done right after the contract terms had expired. So okay, I don't got to use this guy anymore. So then I published right after that. And then they were trying to tell me I couldn't publish, but I said, look at the contract. And then I got a
Right.
lawyer. And anyway, going through that process of being denied every week, like I learned how to be a researcher. I learned how to I learned the in-depths and intricacies of the crypto industry and the technology. So it was beneficial.
Yeah.
I refuse to look at myself as a victim because I had a choice, and I have a choice always going forward, right? So I know we live in a nation of victims, but I can choose which way I want to see myself, and that is as an author to get my word out. So I did. I didn't sell too many copies, but the fact is, in 2010, when they wrote Dodd Frank, there was a generation that didn't have a seat at the table, and that was Generation X. And we weren't part of that law that was created in mind. The law was created for and by boomer generation and in mind the millennials and younger generations, but not mine. So we didn't have that voice. And I said, let me have a voice here.
Yeah.
It's going mostly quelled, but some people bought it. And I keep talking about, there's something we can do better. And that's why I talk about the collaboration, because there wasn't collaboration then, and there can be now, and there should be.
Right. And speaking of baby boomers as well in that generation, so I think it is I think it is abundantly perceived that I think a lot of the decision makers in the United States are of more of the excuse me, the baby boomer generation. Why did the shit hit the fan, so to say? Because it seems like this after World War II. I think the United States experienced a vast period of prosperity, and this was around the time the baby boomers were born, and these were the time when they were growing up, went to school, started careers, and so on and so forth. Why did they drop the ball, let's say for Gen X and let's say generations to come? Because that is a sentiment that is commonly echoed, and perhaps rightfully so. You're essentially given this great megastructure from the greatest generation, let's say. The World War II generation, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan were defeated. Time to, rebuild, so to say. And that effectively was done. Wasn't perfect, still problems, but you had this period where upward mobility and stability, economic stability was nearly, I wouldn't say perfect, but it was very, very powerful. And I think very much so, there was enough of a social contract where people really believed, and rightfully so, I do work hard, I can get a house. I can build assets. I can start building generational wealth. I can have a stable job, so to say. Where did that cliff come from between, I guess you could say, the time baby boomers started, let's say, you know, they created their careers, entered government, entered big industry. How did that cliff come about? How did they build that cliff, so to say? Let's say if we were to put the blame on that generation. And by the way, like I said, a lot of people do. Um, how did they build that cliff where it seems like they got to enjoy that part of the show, but nobody else did?
There was a generation between the greatest generation and the boomer generation called the silent generation.
Okay.
And the silent generation were builders. They were really skilled, talented people. And as you got and the early boomers were very skilled and talented too.
Yeah.
And as you go along the age line to the tail end of the boomers, they are nowhere near as a collective, as a cohort, nowhere near as talented as the early boomers. Um,
Interesting.
now why? There was a transition between the analog and the digital. So you have a lot of younger millennials and older Gen Z who are very digitally savvy. You know, the boomers are not digitally savvy, but the younger millennials, and Z's are not analog savvy. They think they know everything there is to know about everything there is to know about everything there is to know,
Yeah.
and they do not even close. So they don't know the business. And
Right.
and along the line, that transition was not addressed. And with Gen X is that transition. But we were told when we were young that we were going to be the first generation to not have it as good as anyone else ever did. So we retreated into family life. We were laid off and replaced by younger workers without the knowledge of business. And we're all still, like, half of us are more are on the sidelines, and we're impacted by COVID and all
Right.
that stuff. So you have a big drop off in the middle where the real talent, in this country, like for people who can bridge the analog and the digital, are like me, still on the sidelines, having to start from scratch to build our business or be a stay at home family, or that's where the talent is. So we need to be able to capture that talent, step out of family life, but family life is kind of comfortable, right? So how do you step out of family life, go back to business when you've already been thrown out?
Right.
How do you do that? We have a way to go, to step back up, and then, okay, you know what? It's our turn now.
Right.
Because like I said, with the boomers, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of we were out, we're outnumbered, and okay, they keep showing up, and they mean well, but being able to have somebody who can bridge that analog digital and understand the old and then build the new into the old, or the old with the new together, that is a conversation between Generation X, and we were already, crypto's all about community, and Gen X is right now is not all about community. We're all about family life. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just
Right.
the way it is.
Right. And that's quite interesting. And I think technically I am at the beginning of the millennial. So I was born in 1985, so I'm 37. So I think that's technically the beginning of millennials. But I think even within that, I guess even within that age demographic or generation demographic, I think there's still kind of a divide because TikTok came way after way after me anyway.
Oh
But
yeah.
um, it is interesting because I will even say, growing up, that was also the line that was kind of recycled and kind of thrown around a little, maybe perhaps a little bit too casually. Your generation is not going to have it good as our generation, so to say. So we might have been either the second or third generation to kind of receive that. And the funny thing was, there was kind of a casual, like, almost a there was a casual attitude towards it, which, looking back on it, I don't think is right, because parents would say it all the time. And by the way, teachers would too, mind you. Like,
Yeah.
teachers, like, you guys are not going to have it as easy as we did. And everyone just kind of just shrugs their shoulders, like, kind of taking it half seriously. But I'll tell you this, we certainly had no idea the gravity of how that was going to play out, you know, 10, 20 years after, let's say, going through K to 12, and then actually experience kind of the last, let's say, 15 years of world and economic events.
Oh yeah,
How steep that cliff was.
pretty steep. And then
Yeah,
it's not just the the job perspective that steep cloud. I mean, I can go into this for days with you. I mean, addiction, all kinds of
sure,
personal like mental illness, like, all that is a direct impact of it. So
sure,
you got to include that in the conversation and not just say, oh, this person's wrong. Why are they wrong? you know,
right.
uh, and you got to uncover those conversations and have them.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that seem to have led to greater destabilization was, I think, the gradual, or maybe some would say rapid move from a manufacturing economy to a financial services one. Now, I know this is kind of like older macro, microeconomics, but I will say objectively, it seemed like things were more stable when I think this was a manufacturing economy, when we did have Detroit as like the auto manufacturer of the world. It seemed like you had the suburbs and home ownership pop up everywhere, and then it seems like maybe from the late 70s onwards, I guess you could say that was the move towards tangible move away towards traditional manufacturing, and I guess towards really you could say the infrastructure that we have now.
Well, I mentioned the silent generation, right?
Right. I was
So
actually wanted to go back to that. Yeah.
so they built an entire economy on one invention, the air conditioner. You know, everything, all manufacturing was built upon refrigerator, air conditioner, freon, you name it, movement of transportation of agriculture.
Right.
Everything was built on the air conditioner. It was the one invention that was able to make US a leader in economy.
That's interesting.
And we have something similar today that exists called Bitcoin. You know, how can we use Bitcoin mining to become a world leader, not in coal, but in different environmentally friendly ways to create energy? We have that; it exists, and we're not using it the way that it should be used. Like other countries, like El Salvador, have attached it to a volcano. Tonga and Fiji are attaching it to a volcano. Dubai is going to be a leader, and
Oh yeah, a lot of great things
and
coming out of the UAE.
oh yeah. And okay, so how do we in the US leverage this beautiful piece of technology? Not the maximalists or the people who are, pushing
Right.
Bitcoin on everybody now,
Right.
but the actual invention. How do we leverage this invention to be like the air conditioner so that the US can become a world leader in every area again? And we should be looking at it that way. So I look at it as far as the invention, as far as advancements in math, in security, in all that stuff, which
Yeah.
if the silent generation were to here today, they'd do it. So why not?
Yeah.
Why can't we?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And like you mentioned, there are many areas, many groups around the world that are making this very productive use of, let's say, Bitcoin and crypto. People essentially attaching their mining operations to solar panels. For instance, volcanoes, as you've mentioned, powering those processes. Through that. Um, I certainly feel that we have to see a lot more of that, and I think people will, both out of necessity and I think probably out of inspiration as well. So I think you raised some excellent points, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your new podcast. I will have to say you've definitely had some great guests on there, lately as well. In fact, I think one or two of the guests have also been on my show as well. So if you could talk about it, that'd be great.
Sure. When from the period of time from March 2021 till June 2022, I interviewed 182 podcasts and 182 guests from like 40 different countries.
Yeah.
And I got one heck of an education. But also got the education in, okay, um, what I want to do with it. And I was doing it. I was putting everything up on the Irish Tech News, and I had conversations with different coaches and said, "You need to really take your material and have your own show." So I
Yeah.
said, "Okay, well, I don't have any agreements with them, so I'm going to leave the podcast up on the Irish Tech News. I love the Irish people. Anybody can listen to it in Ireland, and still can. But let me create my own. So I have created the Crypto Hipsters Chronicles
Yeah.
right now, which is, I take 4 or 3 or 5 people I've interviewed, and I find a common theme and a common topic, and then
Yeah.
I take in the part of the interview and I get their views on that topic. When I do my podcasts, I don't just ask you, okay, what's the current token price? What's the market value? Like, I don't want my podcast to last a day. Like, I
Right.
want to be able to look back 10 years and say, okay, so I do thought leadership podcasts, and that's, really drawing out the thought leadership from my guests, like you're kind
Yeah.
of doing right now with me. Thank you. Um,
Thank you.
it's, I ask artists, who are right brained, left brain questions, like analyze this, or left
Right.
brain, technologists to ask them creative questions, and kind of makes your brain think in a different way. But
Yeah.
then it draws out the thought leadership that you don't get the opportunity to explain to the world originally. So I bring that out, and then okay, that's the stuff that lasts universally.
Yeah.
So I take those universal comments and the key insights, and I put them together, and I publish it as the Crypto Hipster Podcast. And a lot of people say, "Hey, you're not a hipster." I'm like, "Well, I'm 51. I'm an old man. I'm a hipster." I used to ride my bikes and pop a wheelie, and you knew where my friends and I were because our bikes were on each other's front lawns. You knew where we were. I'm a hipster.
Good stuff. And with the crypto hipster, podcast, what do you have coming up? Let's say next week and the week after. What guests, what subject matter do you have kind of coming up? So all of my viewers can perhaps go ahead and check it out when the episodes come up.
I haven't interviewed anybody new since the first week in June. So, and I plan on interviewing new people in September. You know,
Awesome.
um, truth is, um, during the summertime, I'm a stay at home dad. With my kids, and if you ask any parent, kids are not easy during the summer.
No,
So,
I have a 5-year-old. Trust me. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, and he endless amounts of energy. And I just have one, so I can only
okay,
imagine, 2, 3, 4 kids. Like,
I got
yeah,
two. That's
yeah,
enough.
yeah,
But once September comes and things are back to normal, then absolutely, I'm going to be reaching out to the different, projects and PR firms and companies around the world, and inviting them to be on my show. And if anybody's listening to this or watching this and they want to become on, just let me know. So then we'll pick it up from there. In the meantime, I'm going to be finishing my Ukraine book.
awesome. And speaking of Ukraine, how do you feel that this war, this international catastrophe, is going to play out over the next, let's say, 6 months, to the next 2 years? And beyond that, there's a lot of things happening now, especially with the petroleum Nord Stream, matter in Europe. The various, you could say, military strategic campaigns going on from the Russian military point, and there's also a fair amount of, you could say, either misinformation or inaccuracies being thrown about, in the media as far as what exactly is going on. Like some people have echoed. What really is going on with the war in Ukraine right now? Is progress being made? Or is it certain that the Russian military is going to take over? Like, being that you're making your next book on this, what's your feeling on this? Like, where does your compass point to on this?
My compass points to what's possible with digital transformation. What's possible for countries that are war torn to build, using smart technologies. That's the main crux of my book. As far as I mean, Russia has a lot of military. They have a lot of missiles. They have a lot. They are really have a lot of stockpiles. So
Right.
you can't get through that. But our media in the U.S. when the war started said, "Oh, this is new. Oh, Putin's a madman. They attacked him out of nowhere." This war had been really really ramping up since 2014. Really,
Yeah,
actually, since the Soviet Union dissolved back in 1992, and there are a lot of people in Russia, like a lot of people who are Trump supporters, say, the U.S. can be great again like it was in the 80s, or the Soviet Union can be great again like it was in the 80s. And, that's a mindset of like, okay, it's not as good now as it was, or, it could be like it was, and it's never going to be like it was. So how do you get beyond that? Because there's a lot of similarities between the people, here in the US and the people in Russia and Ukraine who are in the, 40s and 50s and 60s, of things being better than they were, before. And how do you have to do a lot of conversations and have the discussions, but how can we make it so that everybody wins? I don't see it right now.
right.
I just see a lot of blame, but I do see the silver lining, and that is, how do we use digital technologies, to help smaller nations become powerhouses, like El Salvador will, Ukraine will, and some of the other nations, that are building kind of like Ukraine are, like small countries like Pakistan, or whatever, the people could be able to, overcome the government. And so that's the silver lining. So hopefully things play out and work out well, but I don't want to see like a whole entire economy shelled, when it's just, we can have conversations first to try to, figure things out. So that's just me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and speaking on that as well, do you think you made the comparison, when it comes to, like, let's say Trump supporters, excuse me, Trump supporters in the United States, they want to make America great again. And I think this is probably an allusion to the probably the post World War II, economic growth here, which is I think also greatly distorted as far as what's being promoted. Because I think anybody who's grown up in the Northeast, I will say this unabashedly, Donald Trump was almost like a cartoon character growing up. I will say that. So if you're from up here, many of us, I think almost regardless of political affiliation, it was a little surprising when he became a candidate. And kind of the narrative that was, I guess you could say parroted. I will say this. I could not, and I think the Northeast, whether it's my neck of the woods or yours, I think people are generally down the middle for the most part. In my like everyday experience, most people are kind of down the middle. I could not I cannot think of any, let's say, traditional Republicans that I knew that would have voted for him back then or now. Because that is, that like people that I knew, so to say. This is anecdotally speaking. Um, he would have never been taken seriously. In a different time, in a different type of, you could say, structure of society. So, um, but I'm sure we can probably get into that too. But going forward from that, you know, as let's say Trump has made the allusion to making America great again with this very type of um, customized, you could say distorted type of marketing for this, and then let's say Vladimir Putin and the Russian government, for instance, they want to achieve some sort of like historical greatness again. Do you think that historical greatness was more from either the Soviet Union, or or is the greatness he's thinking of more like Imperial Russia? So, late 1800s and before, so to say, with with their monarchy and their, let's say, armies carving out places in Asia and Eastern Europe. Like, what do you think would be on their mind as far as what is what is their representation of Russian greatness? Is it the recent, let's say, Soviet Union, or is it the imperial, you could say, the imperial superstructure that they maybe had, before then?
Wow. I am not a history expert on what Russia was like before Lenin and Stalin. I don't know. I would think that one of the parts of a great nation is that you provide opportunities for everybody and not just half the people,
Yeah,
you know. And alienating half the people. I mean, it's horrible for a country. It's great for crypto,
Right.
Because every crypto is backed by a community that supports it. So you want to
Sure.
splinter everybody, and it's wonderful for every single crypto community, but it's completely awful for everybody who's not in it.
Right.
So what do you go back to? I don't think you can go back to anything, but I think you can build for the future, and you got to do it collaboratively.
Yeah.
So part of being great is having wonderful relationships with all. I mean, not every single country, but there are some that still going to be rogue.
Right.
But how do you build a society and economy that is truly global and who can collaborate together? We're not there yet. Man, you and I probably don't see it. But hopefully someday it'll happen.
Yeah. And this is my final question. This kind of goes along what you're saying. Do you think for societies now to achieve some level of greatness, whether it's, let's say, an idea of what future greatness is, or even, let's say, deriving some sort of past greatness, is blockchain going to have to be a requirement, in that, in that trajectory, so to say? If you want to make a great society and, one that has, prosperity, upward mobility, but also equity and inclusion, you want people to participate in this. You want people to want to, participate in this. I think people just want to know they have a fair shot, or at least as fair as, at least close to fair as possible, in the real world. Is blockchain going to have to be a requirement of that? Because it seems like this. Legacy systems are not going to get us there. If we're to look at what's been going on, they're not going to get people, society as a whole, to that. Whether it's me being, kind of on the older side of millennials or you being a Gen X, I cannot see business as usual getting us there in any shape or form. I can go by the numbers. I can just go by what I even pick up in the newspaper. It's not going to be the path forward in any way, shape, or form.
So let's look. If you take away Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all the top performing companies, what's left? People don't care.
That's a
The
very good
company
point. Yeah.
there are a lot of companies out there that are middle of the road companies that are good, solid companies, like a Harley Davidson or like a Heinz ketchup or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. And people just don't care. They care about the big, buy from Amazon or or search from Google or whatever. And, so there's comes a time where, you got to look past the convenience, because I think convenience and automations hurt. Where, okay,
Interesting.
this is what entrepreneurship is. Let's help entrepreneurs. Let's create new innovative ways. And one of the ways to create innovation has to be doesn't necessarily have to be blockchain. It could be other
Right.
decentralized distributed ledgers. There
For sure.
are other technologies, but there has to be inclusion and involvement in technology in every single level of society. And I tell you right now, there's not. People
Yeah.
can buy a crypto, make some money, but as far as mom and pop shops, as far as blue collar, as far like I have a lot of blue collar ask me all people I know, friends ask me all the time, what's crypto? Like there has to be a knowledge base that filters down or filters up or filters sideways,
Right.
filters
Right.
somewhere that has to be permeable and has to penetrate society, and then people have to use it. And if you're not using it and you're not building something on it, then you have to be able to have the support infrastructure that supports the companies that do. And, then
Yeah.
people will care. So, those growth companies create a product, create a service that uses blockchain, not necessarily use Bitcoin or
Right.
Ethereum, but the 12,000 other cryptocurrencies use something, and then have people help you and learn and collaborate.
That is very, very well said. And You know, I think touching on the fact that this technology needs to be part of the normal, like everyday discourse of people's life. Small businesses and shopkeepers. I feel that ultimately that is where the success is going to be. Once you have you know that that population, really the practical everyday experience. People in the everyday economy, once you have that type of knowledge and application, that is where the real success is going to be. And I think the unfortunate thing is that is also part of the economy that is hurting the most, right now. I mean, even with I guess one could even say, even with the way COVID-19 was handled, and you kind of almost saw a massacre in many ways of small businesses, across the U.S. It kind of makes you wonder who was benefiting from that windfall, so to say. You saw this almost, I was going to say mass exodus, but that's even putting too nice of a tip on it, so to say.
Mhm.
It was almost, it was definitely a lot worse than that. I have to say, Jamil, this was a great episode today. And I want to thank you for coming on. You provided a lot of great insights, through your scholarship in this space, through your experience on your podcast, especially doing that many episodes. Like that's incredible. Having that many guests and having that many, perspectives, and and also bringing your vast amount of experience from Wall Street and big finance, onto the show as well. These are the perspectives. These are the lenses that make a lot of this less foggy and more visible over time. So I'm very much looking forward to checking out your next release, your next publication. Keep me posted on that. I'll be sure to go on Amazon and get myself a copy as well. And I'm looking forward to September when when you bring back on the podcast. I'll definitely.
You'll be receiving an invite.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, please let me know. Yeah, let me know what works for you. I'd love to come on and pick up from here and see where the rabbit hole leads.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, Jamil. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a great
Take care.
weekend.
You too. Bye.